The doorbell rang sharply that Wednesday night, cutting through the quiet and setting my nerves on edge. I glanced at the clock, 9:45 p.m. late for visitors, and certainly unexpected. As I approached the door, I had a strange feeling something big was about to unfold. I opened the door to find a man and a woman standing there, dressed in business attire that looked a bit worn, but they held themselves with a quiet authority. I could sense they were cops before they even spoke. My stomach tightened as the woman's steady gaze met mine. "Good evening, sir," she said, her voice calm and controlled. "Are you Mr. Jason Palmer?" I nodded slowly, trying to keep my face unreadable. "Yes." "Who's asking?" Behind me, my wife, Kira, called out, her voice unsteady. "Jason, who is it?" She stepped into the hallway, stopping when she saw the pair at the door. She looked tense, her hands nervously fidgeting with the towel she'd been using in the kitchen. Her gaze darted between the strangers and me, a flicker of worry crossing her face. "Are you Mrs. Kira Palmer?" the woman asked, shifting her attention to my wife. Kira nodded, looking unsettled. "Yes, that's me. Who are you?" The woman sighed, reaching into her shoulder bag while her partner pulled out a badge from his jacket. "Detective Sergeant Hopkins, and this is Detective Curtis. We're investigating an assault that took place earlier today, and we need to ask you both some questions." I forced my face into a look of confusion. "An assault? And what does that have to do with us?" I saw Kira's face pale beside me. She was gripping the towel like a lifeline, her knuckles white. She opened her mouth as if to say something, but nothing came out. My suspicion had been correct. She was hiding something, and now it was coming to light. Curtis finally spoke, his voice a cold monotone. The victim regained consciousness before surgery and identified Kira Palmer as a key witness to the attack. "We have additional witnesses who confirmed her presence at the scene." A cold satisfaction began to spread through me, though I masked it carefully. I turned to Kira, feigning shock. "Kira, what is this? What's going on?" Her face crumpled, and I watched as the walls of her secret life began to collapse. Kira's face went pale, her breath coming in shallow gasps as she stood frozen under Detective Hopkins' unyielding gaze. She looked at me, her mouth opening and closing as if searching for words, but there was no escaping this. Detective Hopkins cleared her throat, her voice sharp and unrelenting. "Mrs. Palmer, what is your relationship with Mr. Noah Myers? And why were you with him when he was assaulted at the Newton Motel this afternoon?" Kira's face twisted with fear, and for a brief second, I saw her flinch. My stomach churned, my expression darkening as the truth started to take shape. She couldn't hide behind excuses now. I kept my voice low but firm. "Kira, who is this guy? Why are the police here, and why were you even there?" The questions tumbled out, each one fueled by a controlled anger I had spent months building. I didn't care if the detectives saw the fire in my eyes. They were my unknowing allies in this. She swallowed hard, eyes darting to the floor. I met Noah a few times," she whispered, her voice barely audible. I clenched my jaw. "A few times?" Her tone implied it was casual, as if that could soften the sting. But I knew this wasn't just a couple of innocent encounters. I'd pieced things together. Every lie, every excuse she'd used to justify her late nights and extra work. And now, here it was, unraveling. Hopkins didn't hesitate, her tone as cold as ice. "And what happened in the parking lot, Mrs. Palmer? Describe the events." Kira hesitated, her voice a shaky whisper. We were leaving the motel, heading to our cars. And then, someone came out of nowhere." Her eyes darted nervously between us. "He had a bat, and he just started swinging at Noah." Curtis leaned forward, his voice steely. "And what did you do, Mrs. Palmer?" Kira's lip quivered, her gaze darting to me, searching for any shred of sympathy she wouldn't find. I froze. I didn't know what to do. He kept hitting him, even when he was down. I couldn't move. Her voice trailed off as the realization of her helplessness seemed to settle in, and she looked at me, broken and vulnerable. I kept my face impassive, letting the rage simmer just beneath the surface, but I couldn't deny the satisfaction of watching her crumble. She'd betrayed me, lied to me, and now She was paying for it. The detectives left shortly after, their footsteps fading down the driveway. As soon as the door closed, the silence crashed over us like a tidal wave, thick and suffocating. Kira looked up at me, her face a mess of guilt and fear, and I felt my restraint snap. "How could you?" I growled, my voice a low, controlled fury. "You lied to me. You've been sneaking around with this? Noah? Meeting him in motels?" I could hardly believe I was saying the words out loud, but each one cut deeper than the last. Kira flinched, shrinking back, the weight of her choices visible in every part of her. "Jason, I'm so sorry," she whispered, her voice barely holding. "It was a mistake. It got out of control." "A mistake?" I spat, letting my anger finally surface. "One mistake doesn't bring cops to our door. This is more than that, Kira." I took a step closer, letting her feel every ounce of my contempt. "I gave you everything, and this is how you repay me?" She backed away, her eyes welling up with tears. "Jason, please. I never wanted this to happen. Then why did you let it?" My words came out in a whisper, but I knew she felt the anger wrapped around each syllable. Was he worth it? Were those secrets worth tearing our lives apart? She didn't answer, her silence damning. I took a deep breath, my mind flashing back to every late night, every excuse, every little lie she'd crafted to keep me in the dark. I had spent so much time pretending not to notice, letting the doubt fester, hoping it was just my imagination. But now, the truth was here, undeniable and ugly. I turned my back on her, every part of me screaming to walk away and never look back. But I paused, the realization settling in that this was what I had been waiting for, what I had suspected all along. "You made your choice, Kira. Now, you get to live with it." Without another word, I stormed up the stairs, grabbing the bag I'd packed earlier. I was done. As I drove away from the house, the weight of everything hit me like a punch to the gut. The anger hadn't faded, but now it simmered alongside a hollow ache I hadn't expected. I gripped the steering wheel, watching the city lights blur past, my mind racing with every memory, every lie that Kira had fed me. My phone buzzed on the passenger seat. Chase's name lit up on the screen, and I didn't hesitate to pick up. He'd been my lifeline through this mess, and now, he was part of the only plan I had left. "How did it go?" he asked, his voice tight with anticipation. "Exactly like we thought," I replied, my voice steady. Detectives showed up, laid it all out in front of her. She cracked the second they mentioned Noah's name. Everything came out. Chase let out a low chuckle, one tinged with dark satisfaction. "Good. That's exactly what she deserves. Bella's next. Perkins is supposed to show up tonight." I made sure he had every bit of dirt he needed to make her squirm. The mention of Bella made me grip the wheel tighter. Chase and I had become unlikely partners in this, a twisted alliance forged from shared betrayal. His wife, Bella, had been just as involved in this mess as Kira, their girls' nights out turning into something darker, something hidden and forbidden. Bella was Kira's confidant, her partner in crime, and Chase had been just as blindsided as I was when he discovered the truth. "She deserves every second of it," I muttered, the anger flaring up again. "After everything they did, they've earned this." Chase's voice softened slightly, almost contemplative. "You know, Jason, I thought revenge would feel different, but now that it's here, it's like, I don't know, it's empty." I knew what he meant. We'd planned for this for so long, each detail crafted to make sure Kira and Bella faced the consequences of their choices. But now that it was done, now that the truth was out and the pieces had fallen into place, there was a strange, unsettling silence. "We're both free now," I replied, trying to ignore the weight settling in my chest. "They're the ones who have to live with what they did. Let them try to claw their way out of it." We stayed on the line a moment longer, both of us letting the reality sink in. The revenge had been satisfying, sure, but beneath it, there was a different kind of emptiness, a reminder of everything we'd lost in the pursuit of it. "Take care, Jason," Chase finally said, his voice quieter. "Guess we'll see what comes next." As I ended the call, I couldn't shake the feeling that revenge hadn't freed me. It had just left a different kind of scar. The following night, I found myself in a dimly lit bar at the edge of town, nursing a drink and watching the clock as the minutes crawled by. There was a hollowness in the pit of my stomach, one I hadn't expected to feel. I should have been celebrating the end of Kira's lies, savoring the image of her face crumbling as the truth came out. But instead, it felt like I'd ripped open a wound that wouldn't heal. The phone buzzed in my pocket again. Another message from Chase. Bella's still spiraling. Tried calling me twice today. I didn't pick up. Let her sit in it. I read the message, feeling a bitter satisfaction at her downfall. Kira's was just as inevitable, though I didn't know exactly where she'd gone after I left. I'd like to think she was trapped in her own version of hell, scrambling to make sense of the mess she'd created. But even the thought of her suffering brought no relief, just another dull ache where anger had once burned bright. I was about to reply to Chase when he called. His voice was low, carrying the weight of sleepless nights. Jason, you ever wonder if we took it too far? The question hung in the air, settling over me like a heavy fog. I took a slow breath, watching the amber liquid swirl in my glass. Maybe, but they made their choices, Chase. They took everything from us. We just leveled the field. He sighed, and I could hear the exhaustion, the way revenge had worn him down too. It's just, Bella was a part of my life for years. And now, it's like all of it was a lie. Even with this payback, I can't shake the feeling that it didn't bring me any closer to peace. I nodded, though he couldn't see it. I'd thought the same thing in quiet moments, the emptiness creeping in around the edges, the realization that revenge hadn't mended anything. If anything, it had fractured whatever was left of the life I'd once had. You know, we're both starting over, I said quietly, more to myself than him. We get to rebuild, piece by piece, without them holding us back. They're the ones who will wake up every day knowing what they did. Maybe that's the only real justice. Chase fell silent, as if letting the thought settle. Yeah, maybe you're right. We ended the call, but the quiet didn't feel like victory. It felt like surrender. The weekend slipped by in a blur of empty hours and restless thoughts. By Sunday evening, the emptiness had fully settled in, a weight I couldn't shake no matter how many distractions I tried to find. I returned to the house briefly, out of a strange habit, almost as if I expected to find Kira waiting, that somehow everything would snap back to normal. But the house was silent, almost too still. Her things were still scattered here and there, a reminder of a life that no longer existed. I found myself standing in the kitchen, staring at the remnants of her presence. A coffee mug, a half-open drawer, the little signs of a life we'd shared. The realization hit me hard. Everything I'd done, everything I'd planned to tear her down, had left me standing here, alone in the ruins of what we'd built. My phone vibrated, breaking the silence. Another message from Chase, though his tone had shifted over the past few days, growing quieter, less triumphant. Bella's gone. Officially packed up and left town. Nothing left but a few boxes and a note. I could almost feel the hollowness in his words. Chase had gotten what he wanted, the finality he'd chased for so long, but I sensed the same void in him that was swallowing me whole. Revenge had been our lifeline, a way to stay afloat in the storm of betrayal. But now, the waters were calm, and all we could see were the empty shores we'd washed up on. I replied simply, "It's over, Chase. Now we get to move on." But as I put down the phone, I knew that moving on wouldn't be as simple as I'd imagined. The anger, the bitterness, the hurt, it all lingered, echoing in the silence of the empty house. I sat down at the kitchen table, letting the quiet surround me, realizing that this was the life I'd fought so hard to reclaim, and it felt more foreign than ever. I poured myself a drink, staring at the amber liquid, trying to drown out the ache that had settled in my chest. I'd won, if you could call it that. Kira was gone, her lies exposed, her life in ruins. But I'd torn down everything with her, leaving nothing but an empty house and a quiet I couldn't escape. I took a long sip, feeling the burn. The silence closed in around me, and for the first time, I wondered if the revenge had cost me more than I was willing to lose. The week drifted by in a haze of emptiness and regret. Every plan, every ounce of revenge that Chase and I had built seemed to dissolve into a heavy silence that hung over us. I was settling into that silence, trying to adjust to a life that felt oddly hollow, when the letter arrived. It was Saturday night. I just returned from the office, exhausted from a day that felt like it would never end. As I stepped up to the front door, I noticed a plain white envelope lying on the mat. No stamp, no markings, just my name, scrawled in dark ink. I felt a flicker of unease as I tore open the envelope and pulled out a single sheet of paper. The words were typed, short, and ominous. If you thought it was over, you were wrong. This game has two sides. Watch your back. The words were simple but sharp, each one driving home a sense of dread I hadn't felt in a long time. My mind raced. Who would leave something like this? The first person who came to mind was Kira. She'd left quietly, without much of a fight, almost too easily, considering everything she'd lost. I thought she'd be desperate, angry. But maybe that was the point. Maybe I'd underestimated her. The second line on the note caught my eye. You think you know everything, but the end is still to come. My hands tightened around the paper, anger mixing with a new, unsettling realization. Kira and Bella hadn't played their final card. They'd let us think we'd won, let us savor the victory. But they hadn't been the ones left broken, after all. The note implied they'd been in control all along, anticipating our moves, almost leading us to believe our revenge was complete. And now, they were ready to strike back. I called Chase immediately, my voice tight with urgency. Chase, you need to get over here. Now. He arrived within minutes, his expression mirroring the same unease that was twisting in my gut. I handed him the note, watching his face harden as he read it. What the hell is this? He muttered, anger flashing in his eyes. You think it's from Bella? It has to be, I replied, the words coming out sharper than I intended. They've been planning something all along, Chase. They let us think we'd ruin them, but maybe this was part of their plan the whole time. The realization hit us both, a cold, bitter truth sinking in. Kira and Bella hadn't been helpless victims. They'd been calculating, allowing us to dig our own graves, leaving us blind to their next move. They hadn't just cheated. They'd turned the betrayal into a weapon, and now they were ready to use it. So, what do we do? Chase's voice was barely a whisper, as if the weight of the situation was finally crashing down on him. I didn't have an answer. For the first time in months, I felt a flicker of genuine fear. A sense that the revenge I'd poured everything into had backfired in a way I hadn't seen coming. And Kira, the woman I thought I knew, was standing on the other side of it, holding the reins all along. The next day, Chase and I were holed up in my office, combing through everything we knew about Kira and Bella. The note had shattered any illusion of victory, leaving only questions and a gnawing dread. I felt like I was seeing Kira for the first time. Her secrets layered beneath secrets, each one sharp enough to cut. Chase leaned back, rubbing his face, exhaustion and tension etched into his features. So, what are we missing, Jason? What did they plan that we didn't see? I shook my head, frustration building. I don't know. But if they're moving against us, we need to know how far they're willing to go. Just as I spoke, another message popped up on my phone. It was from an unknown number. Reluctantly, I opened it. Nice try, Jason. But we're just getting started. Did you really think we didn't know about your plans? Your little revenge? You have no idea what's coming. The message hit like a punch to the gut. It was as if they'd been watching us, tracking every move, maybe even setting the trap. Kira and Bella hadn't been clueless. They'd orchestrated everything, letting us believe we were the ones in control. They had allowed us to feel the high of revenge, only to pull the rug out at the last second. Chase's phone chimed at the same moment, and I watched his face darken as he read his own message. Hope you enjoyed the show, Chase. Your careers, your lives. We're ready to bring it all down. You know what you did. Now it's our turn. His hands trembled slightly, his face pale. They're going to ruin us, Jason. They're not backing down. They're just getting started. My mind raced, searching for an escape, a way to counter whatever Kira and Bella had prepared. But as I went over every detail, every misstep, I realized they'd covered their tracks. They had anticipated everything. And then, the final blow landed. Check this out, I said, pulling up my bank account on my laptop. I felt a cold sweat break over me as I noticed several unauthorized transfers, small amounts here and there that had added up over time. Chase quickly checked his accounts too, and the same pattern emerged. "They've been bleeding us dry," Chase whispered, horror dawning on him. Little by little. It's genius, really." The realization was brutal. While we'd been plotting their downfall, they'd been siphoning funds, setting up a financial safety net, a shadow network of accounts and connections that could implicate us if revealed. If we tried to counter them now, it would look like we'd orchestrated everything ourselves. We'd walked into a trap, blinded by anger and betrayal, only to find ourselves standing at the edge of a cliff they'd designed. Kira and Bella weren't the victims. They were the architects of their own justice, ruthless and methodical, turning our own revenge against us. The truth settled like a stone in my chest. We'd lost. And this time, there was no getting back what they'd taken.